They said her unauthorized shot destabilized the siege, but the declassified transcript shows she weaponized a doomsday, Prophet's theology against his own certainty, and the FBI buried the proof for 8 years. Claudia Reyes stood in her Capitol Hill apartment at 5:57 a.m., hands dusted with flour watching steam rise. From sourdough starter, she fed every morning with the same measured rhythm she used to teach conflict resolution. The silver streak in her black hair caught fluorescent light. No family photos on the counter, no framed commendations, just the stopped analog clock on the kitchen wall, hands frozen at 16:19. She had not touched a firearm in 8 years. She opened the envelope. 4,000 pages released under FOIA request. Journalist name redacted. Effective date, today. Access portal login credentials enclosed. She read the cover letter twice. Standard bureaucratic language, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just notification that what had been classified was now public record. She poured coffee. Black, no sugar. Sipped it standing at the counter while dawn broke gray over the city. The stopped clock reflected in the kitchen window behind her. By 0900, she stood in front of 23 undergraduates in a Northern Virginia community college classroom. Fluorescent overhead lighting. Whiteboard covered in conflict resolution models she had drawn before class. Mirrored speech patterns, de-escalation, through active listening, tactical empathy. Her desk held no personal items. She taught in measured cadence, soft authority, no contractions when making critical points. Students took notes. Some watched her hands when she demonstrated body language cues. She showed them how to read micro-expressions, how to map emotional terrain in real time, how to diffuse confrontation by offering exit ramps wrapped in dignity. She did not tell them she had learned these skills negotiating with men who believed God spoke directly into their ears. Office hours began at 1100. She sat at her desk reviewing student essays on crisis communication theory when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on the third ring. "This is Claudia Reyes." "Ms. Reyes, this is Maya Calhoun. I'm an investigative journalist with The Intercept. Do you have a few minutes?" Claudia set down her pen. She did not ask how the journalist got her number. "What is this regarding?" "FOIA request just released 4,000 pages on Shepherd's Gate. Can you explain why ballistics show you deliberately shot the compound's only working clock?" Silence. "Ms. Reyes?" Claudia watched a student walk past her office door. Backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones in, oblivious. "The report says you fired without authorization at 16:18 hours. Hit analog clock in steeple, froze hands at 16:19. 8 people died 90 minutes later." Claudia's voice did not change register. "Is there a question?" Maya Calhoun did not pause. "Did you intend to stop that clock?" "Yes." "Why?" Claudia ended the call. She opened her laptop. Campus Wi-Fi loaded slow. She pulled up News Aggregator. The story had already broken. Wire services running it nationally. FBI negotiators' frozen hour cost lives. Declassified documents reveal unauthorized shot during 2016 siege. Wire photo from November 14, 2016. Younger version of herself in tactical vest outside compound perimeter. Telephoto. Lens catching her face through mobile command post window. She remembered that moment. Remembered the photographer, remembered the cold. She clicked through to the full article. Embedded statement from Assistant Director Robert Voss, 61, her former supervisor, released same day the declassification notice went public. Wireframe glasses visible in press photo. That familiar posture, shoulders angled slightly away from the camera, hands clasped in front of him like a man, delivering unfortunate but necessary news. The findings remain clear. Agent Reyes's actions introduced combat imagery into delicate negotiation, destabilizing rapport and escalating tension. 8 souls paid the price. While we respect the FOIA process, declassification does not alter the fundamental assessment reached in 2016. Unauthorized discharge of a firearm during active crisis negotiation represents catastrophic lapse in judgment. The Bureau stands by its institutional review. She read it twice. Voss had not changed his language in 8 years. Same passive construction, same hedging qualifiers, same deflection. Her phone buzzed. Text message from unknown number. "Mom, I saw the news. Is it true?" Mira, 23 years old, graduate student in clinical psychology. 6 years since they last spoke. Claudia stared at the screen. Her daughter used the same tentative phrasing Claudia remembered from when she was 12. Rebuild trust starts with small questions. She typed, "It is more complicated than the article suggests." She deleted it, typed, "I cannot explain without access to the full transcript." She deleted that too, stared at the blinking cursor. Her daughter had reached out. First contact in 6 years. And Claudia had nothing to offer except the same silence that had defined their estrangement. She locked her phone without replying. Classes ended at 1600. She drove home through traffic. Radio news mentioned Shepherd's Gate twice. She turned it off. Parked in her building's underground lot. Took the stairs to the 3rd floor. Unlocked her apartment door. The stopped clock greeted her from the kitchen wall. She made tea, Earl Grey, let it steep exactly 4 minutes. Poured it into a mug with no handle that she had owned for 15 years. Sat at her kitchen table. The declassification notice lay where she had left it that morning. She logged into the portal using the credentials from the envelope. 4,000 pages, scanned documents, after-action reports, incident logs, thermal imaging analysis, ballistics summaries, radio transcripts with timestamps, everything except the one document that mattered. She searched negotiation transcript Reyes Marsh. No results. She searched audio recording. November 14th, 2016, 1547 to 1714. No results. She searched Shepherd's Gate primary negotiator communication log. Partial results, 17 pages, all heavily redacted. Black bars covering every exchange between her and Reverend Caleb Marsh. Footnote at bottom of page 3. Full transcript remains classified under Ongoing Militia Investigation Exemption 7A. Continued national security interest in operational methods. She closed the laptop. At 2200 hours, she pulled a cardboard file box from her bedroom closet. Dust on the lid. She carried it to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside, personal copies of unclassified after-action summaries, news clippings from 2016 and 2018, her own handwritten. Timeline of November 14, 2016. She had written it 3 days after the siege ended while memory was still forensic. Grid coordinates, wind speed, temperature readings. Exact timestamps for every action she took from arrival at 1547 hours to HRT breach at 1832 hours. She spread the documents across the table, found her timeline, read her own handwriting from 8 years ago. 1618 hours, fired 1 round. Remington 700, 175 grain BTHP, 347 meters to steeple clock. Windage 2.3 MEP and MPH left to right. Hit clock mechanism, hand stopped at 1619. 1622 hours, Marsh ceased reciting Revelation, asked if I had stopped time. 1625 hours, confirmed clock no longer moves, asked if he believed apocalypse schedule could be interrupted. 1628 hours, Marsh silent for 73 seconds, then said, if the hour is suspended, the Father's wrath is suspended. 1732 hours, Marsh released 12 women and children through North Gate. 1808 hours, Marsh disarmed deadman switch on propane system, walked out alone. 1832 hours, HRT breached compound. 8 holdouts in basement refused to exit. Propane explosion killed all 8. She had written it in past tense, clinical precision, no editorializing. The kind of report that disappears into classified archives and never surfaces because the truth is too strange to defend in congressional testimony. Caleb Marsh believed the apocalypse would trigger at midnight November 14, 2016. Believed it with the certainty of a man who had spent 47 years interpreting scripture through the lens of cold. War bunker theology and rural Montana isolation. 41 adults in that compound, women and children. Deadman switch wired to enough propane to vaporize the chapel and everyone inside. FBI had thermal imaging showing 17 people in the basement. HRT had green light at sunset if negotiation failed. Claudia had arrived at 1547 hours. Listened to Marsh recite Revelation over the phone line. Listened to him explain how the 7 seals would break at midnight. Listened to him describe the wrath of the Lamb. She recognized the cadence. Former Army chaplain. Burn scar on his right forearm from a propane accident in 2009. Long pauses between sentences. Biblical certainty that left no room for doubt. She had 87 minutes to hack his theology. She calculated the angle, wind speed, distance. The steeple clock was analog, visible from every window in the compound. She did not ask permission. She fired at 16:18 hours. The .308 round hit the clock mechanism at exactly 16:19 hours. The minute hand stopped mid-sweep. The hour hand froze, pointing at 16. The second hand locked in place. Time stopped. Marsh saw it. Everyone in the compound saw it. The clock that had been ticking toward midnight went silent. The apocalypse schedule depended on linear time. If time stopped, the trigger could not arrive. Marsh asked her if she had stopped time. She said yes. She asked if the Father's wrath required the appointed hour. Marsh went silent. She counted 73 seconds. Then he said the sentence that should have been in every report, every briefing, every institutional review. If the hour is suspended, the Father's wrath is suspended. At 17:32 hours, he released 12 women and children. At 18:08 hours, he disarmed the dead man's switch and walked out with his hands raised. 23 adults followed him. 8 holdouts refused. HRT breached. The basement exploded. Official review concluded her unauthorized discharge destabilized the negotiation. Concluded the 8 deaths resulted from escalated tension. Concluded she violated protocol and introduced combat imagery that fractured rapport. Assistant Director Voss testified at the inquiry. Wireframe glasses, institutional passive voice. He said the shot represented catastrophic lapse in judgment. The transcript of her 87-minute negotiation with Marsh remained classified. No one heard Marsh say, "If the hour is suspended, the Father's wrath is suspended." No one heard him negotiate his surrender in exchange for postponed apocalypse. No one heard him thank her for giving him time to reconsider. Claudia was blamed for 8 deaths and early retired at age 38 in 2018. Took a teaching position at a community college, taught undergraduates how to de-escalate conflict. Never explained why she understood the psychology of certainty better than anyone in the bureau. She closed the file box, looked at the stopped clock on her kitchen wall, 16:19, the minute hand pointing at 19, the hour hand frozen between 16 and 17. She had taken it from the steeple after the compound was cleared. No one asked for it back. It sat in evidence for 2 years. When she retired, they sent it to her apartment in a cardboard box with a property release form. She hung it in her kitchen because some truths need witnesses even if no one asks questions. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Mira. "I want to believe you." Claudia stared at the message. Her daughter had not said that in 6 years, had not offered conditional faith, had not left the door open. She typed, "The transcript exists. It will surface." She hit send before she could delete it. Then she sat in her kitchen under fluorescent light with the stopped clock on the wall and the declassification notice. On the table and 4,000 pages that proved nothing except what the Bureau wanted proved. Somewhere in a classified server, the audio file existed. 87 minutes. Her voice and Marsh's voice. The moment he understood time had stopped. The moment he chose to save 23 lives because postponed apocalypse was better than immediate wrath. Maya Calhoun would find it. Journalists always found what institutions buried. The question was whether anyone would believe it, whether Voss would retire quietly or double down, whether Mira would wait for proof or walk away again. Claudia finished her tea, washed the mug, dried it, placed it in the cabinet, turned off the kitchen light. The stopped clock disappeared into shadow. She did not need to see it. She knew exactly what time it showed. The helicopter noise died at 15:47 hours, and Claudia Reyes stepped onto frozen Montana ground carrying nothing but a tactical vest, an earpiece, and a spiral notebook she had filled with de-escalation protocols on 43 prior operations. The silver streak in her black hair caught late afternoon sun. She was 38 years old. She had not failed yet. The FBI Crisis Negotiation Unit mobile command post sat 200 meters from the Shepherd's Gate compound. Perimeter, satellite trucks angled toward white clapboard walls, thermal imaging monitors glowing blue inside canvas, tents, sniper positions dug into ridgeline scrubland. Barbed wire ringed the property. High-altitude wind carried the smell of propane and livestock feed. The chapel steeple rose 15 meters above the main building, wrought iron cross visible against gray sky. Assistant Director Robert Voss waited inside the command tent, wireframe glasses reflecting monitor light. He did not shake her hand. He gestured toward the briefing map tacked to plywood. 41 adults inside, he said. Followers of Caleb Marsh, age 52, former Army chaplain, decorated. 2 Iraq deployments, honorable discharge in 2009. Founded this operation in 2011 after a tax dispute with IRS turned into sovereignty declaration, no prior violence, no criminal record. Psych eval from VA says stable, articulate, deeply certain. Claudia studied the compound layout, single-story dormitories flanking the chapel, propane tanks stacked against the north wall, fencing that looked like it had been erected with military precision. What triggered today? She asked. Voss pulled a folder from the table. Marsh claims federal agents are harbingers of apocalypse prophesied for midnight tonight, so the Wowzo hours. He believes the world ends at that moment. He's wired propane to a deadman switch. Hostage rescue team has green light at sunset 1920 hours if negotiation fails. He handed her the folder. She flipped it open. Photographs of Caleb Marsh showed a lean man with burn scars on his right forearm, the kind of scars that came from propane accidents, not combat. Eyes that did not waver from the camera. She read the psych eval summary. Subject exhibits premillennialist theology with survivalist sovereignty overlay, literalist interpretation of scripture, no evidence of psychotic disorder. Capacity for violence assessed as low absent external provocation. Your job, Voss continued, is to get him talking, find leverage, extract civilians before dark. Standard rapport building, mirrored language, family voice tactics if needed. You've deployed this 43 times in 8 years. Success rate 91%. This should be routine. Claudia looked up from the file. Nothing about this sounds routine. Voss cleaned his glasses with a handkerchief the way he did when he wanted to avoid eye contact. Then make it routine, Agent Reyes. We have protocols for a reason. She walked to the thermal imaging station. The technician pointed at the screen. Heat signatures clustered in the chapel, scattered through dormitories, concentrated in the basement. She counted 17 in the basement alone. Compound layout, she said to the tech. What's visible from outside? He zoomed the image. Chapel has windows on all 4 sides. Analog clock mounted in the steeple faces south toward our position. Only working timepiece on the property. Marsh removed all digital clocks 3 months ago. Believes electronic signals are government surveillance. Claudia stared at the clock face on the monitor. Wrought iron hands, glass front. 15 meters above ground, mounted inside the steeple but visible through an open frame. She could see the time from where she stood. 15:53 hours. The ballistics officer approached carrying a scope. We've got clear line to that clock through the chapel window. Analog face, wrought iron hands. Ricochet risk is high if anyone fires at it. Interior wall behind the mechanism is occupied. Thermal shows 3 people standing there. Claudia filed that detail. She returned to Voss. What's his demand? He has no demands. That's the problem. He's not negotiating for anything. He's waiting for midnight. She opened her notebook and began writing. Time is fixed variable. Apocalyptic certainty. No leverage through consequences or outcomes. Voss handed her the negotiation protocol binder, a 3-ring manual thick as a phone book. Standard hostage rescue doctrine. Rapport building, mirrored language, family voice tactics. Everything you need is in there. She had memorized it 6 years ago. She took it anyway. At 16:05 hours, she sat in a folding chair outside the command tent with a field phone in her hand. The landline to the compound had been connected since dawn. No one had answered. She dialed. 3 rings. Then a voice, male, measured cadence with long pauses between phrases. Agent Reyes, you have come to witness the hour. She matched his rhythm, softened her voice, eliminated contractions. Reverend Marsh, I have come to listen. Silence. Wind across scrubland. Then, the seals are broken, the riders are mounted. At midnight, the world you serve ends. I will not surrender my flock to Babylon. Claudia wrote in her notebook, cosmological countdown, not tactical. She kept her voice level. Reverend, I can offer food, medical access, safe passage for women and children. We can arrange. Time does not bend for your offers, Agent. The hour is fixed. She tried family voices at 16:15 hours because Voss ordered her to. Recordings from Marsh's estranged sister, former congregants who had left the compound. She played them over the phone line. Marsh listened without interrupting. When the last recording ended, he said, their voices are echoes from the world that ends tonight. I love them. That is why I cannot follow them into the fire. Claudia hung up and walked to the thermal monitor. She watched Marsh's heat signature move through the chapel. He stopped, raised his arm, lowered it, stopped again, raised his arm. "He's checking the time," she said. The technician nodded. "Every 90 seconds, he keeps looking at that steeple clock." She walked back to the field phone. Voss followed. "Try the family voices again, emphasize his sister's children. Make it personal." Claudia stared at the compound. The steeple clock read 16:17 hours. She turned to Voss. "He is not negotiating from fear. He is negotiating from certainty. Every tactic I have assumes the subject fears consequences or desires outcomes. He fears nothing, he desires only theological vindication." Voss crossed his arms. "Then find a way to introduce doubt." She thought about that. Marsh checked the clock every 90 seconds. His entire certainty rested on a single premise. Midnight triggers apocalypse. The hour is fixed. Time does not bend. What if it did? She keyed the command channel. "I need authorization for a warning shot. Exterior target, away from occupied structures." Voss stared at her. "Negative. We do not introduce gunfire into peaceful negotiation, continue rapport building. Sir, I need to disrupt his temporal framework." "That is not a thing, Agent. Stay on protocol." Claudia looked at the steeple clock. Wrought iron hands visible through the chapel window, backlit by afternoon sun. Ricochet risk if she missed. Rounds could penetrate the interior wall where thermal showed 3 people standing. Margin of error, 8 centimeters. She unholstered her sidearm, Remington 700. She had qualified expert marksman 4 years running. She calculated angle, windage, distance, 347 meters to target. Wind left to right at 2.3 miles per hour. At 16:18 hours, she fired. The round punched through the analog clock face. Glass shattered. The wrought iron hands froze mid-sweep. The sound echoed across the compound and rolled down the ridgeline into the valley. HRT snipers on the radio. "Unauthorized discharge, command post, do you copy?" Voss behind her, furious. "Reyes, what the hell did you just do?" She kept the field phone line open. She did not answer Voss. She waited. 47 seconds of silence. Then Marsh's voice, different register. Wonder threading through confusion, theological framework splintering in real. "Time. You stop time." Long pause, wind through the phone line. "You stop time, Agent Reyes." She exhaled slowly, kept her voice measured. "Reverend Marsh, the hour is no longer upon us." Another pause. She could hear him breathing. Then, almost whispering, "The clock has ceased. The clock has ceased." His cadence fractured. Biblical certainty meeting physical contradiction. Perhaps he grants reprieve. Perhaps I am to reconsider. If the hour is suspended. Claudia leaned forward. "Time is stopped, Reverend. The midnight you feared cannot arrive if the hour does not move. You have been given a gift. Use it to shepherd your flock to safety." "I must pray on this." The line went quiet but stayed connected. She could hear him breathing. Footsteps, the creak of wooden floor. The command post erupted behind her. Voss demanding she return immediately for debriefing. HRT commander requesting permission to breach while Marsh was confused. She ignored both. She kept the phone line open and listened to Caleb Marsh breathe on the other end. At 16:25 hours, the thermal imaging showed Marsh kneeling in the chapel, head bowed. Claudia watched the monitor. Voss stood behind her, wire frame glasses reflecting blue light. "You just violated every protocol in the manual," he said quietly. "If this goes sideways, you own it." Claudia did not turn. She watched Marsh's heat signature on the screen, motionless in prayer. The steeple clock hands frozen at 16:19 hours. "If it goes right," she said, "you will bury it." She did not know yet how true that was. The field phone stayed connected for the next 67 minutes. She listened to Marsh pray. She listened to him walk the chapel floor. She listened to silence that felt like recalibration, certainty bending under the weight of physical evidence that time itself had stopped. At 17:32 hours, Marsh spoke again, his voice calm now, almost gentle. "Agent Reyes, I am sending out the women and children, 12 souls. They will walk through the front gate. Do not approach them. Let them come to you." Voss grabbed the radio. "Copy that. HRT, hold positions, let them walk." Claudia kept the phone to her ear. "Thank you, Reverend. I am not done praying." But if the hour is suspended, then perhaps their departure does not violate what must come. She watched the compound gate open. 12 people walked out, women in long dresses, children holding hands. HRT medics moved forward slowly, hands visible, no weapons drawn. The women and children crossed the barbed wire perimeter and kept walking until they reached the command post. One of the women looked back at the compound, then she looked at Claudia. She did not say anything. She just nodded once and turned away. At 18:08 hours, Marsh disarmed the dead man switch on the propane tanks. Thermal imaging confirmed it. Voss ordered HRT to stand down from green light status. At 18:32 hours, HRT breached the compound. Claudia did not watch. She sat in the folding chair with the field phone in her hand, listening to the sound of boots on wood, voices shouting. Commands, the chaos of men moving through rooms where certainty had collapsed. 23 adults surrendered. They walked out with hands raised, blinking in the late sun. 8 holdouts stayed in the basement. When HRT descended, the propane ignited. Claudia heard the explosion from 200 meters away, felt it through the ground. She set the phone down, walked to the thermal monitor. The basement signatures were gone. Voss stood beside her. He did not say anything. He just cleaned his glasses and stared at the screen. At 19:20 hours sunset, Claudia walked to her quarters and wrote a timeline in her notebook. She documented every word Marsh had said. She wrote down his exact response at 16:28 hours. If the hour is suspended, the Father's wrath is suspended. She wrote down the time she fired the shot, the time the clock stopped, the time Marsh released the 12, the time he disarmed the switch, the time HRT breached. She did not write down what she expected to happen next. She already knew. 23 people alive because time stopped. 8 people dead because HRT breached. The math would not matter. The protocol violation would. She closed the notebook, put it in her bag, went to sleep. 3 days later, she wrote the timeline again on clean paper in ink that would not fade. She kept it in a file box under her bed for 8 years. The stopped clock from the steeple arrived at her apartment 2 years after the siege, released from evidence hold. She hung it on her kitchen wall, hands frozen at 16:19 hours, dust gathering in the mechanism. Some things are meant to stay broken until someone asks the right question. 73 minutes. Claudia stood at the mobile command post perimeter and watched the steeple clock through binoculars. The hands froze at 16:19 hours. The minute hand had locked mid-sweep between the 1 and the 2. The hour hand pointed almost perfectly at the 4. She lowered the binoculars and checked her watch. 16:25 hours. 7 minutes since the shot. The compound sat silent. No movement visible through thermal imaging. 41 adults inside when she arrived. 12 were children and women. 29 adults capable of tactical decision. Caleb Marsh, somewhere inside, calculating what the stopped clock meant for midnight and the apocalypse he believed would trigger when the hour arrived. She picked up the field phone. Marsh had not hung up. The line stayed open. She could hear him breathing on the other end, then praying. Stream of biblical verses about signs and reprieve and divine testing. She did not interrupt. Let him process the theological earthquake she had just triggered with 175 grains of copper-jacketed lead fired through wrought iron and glass. Voss stood 15 meters behind her, talking into his cell phone. She could hear fragments. FBI director on the line. Word of the unauthorized shot had reached Washington in under 6 minutes. Institutional pressure traveling faster than sound. Marsh spoke at 16:41 hours. His voice carried that apocalyptic certainty, but frayed now at the edges. Agent Reyes, if time has stopped, then the prophesied hour cannot arrive, but neither can tomorrow. My people cannot live suspended between moments. Claudia kept her voice measured, no contractions. Then let them step into tomorrow. Send out those who wish to see the sun rise. I must deliberate. The line went quiet, but he did not hang up. Voss finished his call and walked to her position. His wireframe glasses caught sunlight. He cleaned them with his sleeve. That better work, Agent. I just lied to the director. Told him you fired a warning shot per negotiation tactics. Situation remains fluid. Those were my exact words. She did not look at him. She kept the binoculars trained on the compound entrance. Understood, sir. You made me complicit in a protocol violation that could end both our careers. So yes, this better work. Thermal imaging showed movement at 16:58 hours. 12 figures gathering near the front entrance, small heat signatures. children, women. Marsh came back on the phone, his voice steadier now. Decision made. I am sending the youngest flock. They are not yet of age to choose martyrdom. If your superiors honor the stopped hour, they will guarantee safe passage. You have my word, Reverend. Your word suspended time itself. I will trust it. The compound door opened at 17:14 hours. 12 women and children walked out with hands raised. HRT moved in formation. Weapons trained, but fingers off triggers. They escorted the group across the perimeter to the medical staging area. Paramedics checked vitals, all unharmed, no visible injuries. One woman, Jennifer Oakes, 30 years old, hands trembling, told the paramedic near Claudia's position. Reverend said the Angel stopped the clock. He said we have tomorrow now. Claudia watched FBI personnel count and document all 12. Loaded them into transport vans. Driven to staging area 2 kilometers south for debrief. Psychologists would interview each. Establish timeline of compound conditions. Confirm Marsh's fixation on the steeple clock and the midnight deadline he believed would trigger the end. Voss saw the opening. He moved to her position. Press him now, Agent. Full surrender while he's in yielding mode. She lifted the phone. Reverend, you have shown mercy. Now show faith. Bring everyone out. Let tomorrow begin for all of you. Marsh paused. I must consult the elders. They have not yet accepted the sign. Thermal imaging showed movement inside the chapel. Marsh addressing gathered adults. Argument visible through heat signatures. Some gesturing toward the door, others backing away, split forming. The compound microphone picked up fragments. Marsh's voice. The clock has stopped, divine sign. Another voice, older male. FBI trick, they mock us. Marsh returned to the phone at 17:51 hours. Voice tired now. 8 of my flock refused to leave. They believe your shot was deception, that the clock runs still in heaven's sight, that midnight comes regardless. I cannot force them. Then disarm the switch. Save yourself and those willing to walk out. Long silence, 80 seconds by her watch. Then, Agent Reyes, if I disarm the propane, I betray those who believe the hour is fixed. But if I keep my hand on the trigger, I doom those who wish to see tomorrow. First Kraken is certainty, not theological doubt, operational doubt. The mechanical problem of how to honor both his people's faith and their survival, she pressed. Reverend, you said time stopped. If that is true, the switch is irrelevant. Midnight cannot come. Disarm it. Prove your faith in the sign. Silence stretched to 18:02 hours. Then his voice came back. You argue like a chaplain, Agent Reyes. Very well. I disarm the mechanism. The stopped hour is my shield. Audible click over the phone line. Deadman switch disengaged. HRT monitors confirmed it immediately. Pressure sensor on the propane line went neutral. Marsh had released the trigger. Voss ordered HRT to prepare breach. We have compliance on the switch. Move in before he changes his mind. Claudia turned. Sir, he is mid-negotiation. 23 adults are still inside, 8 refusing to exit. Give me time to extract the willing. Sunset is 19:20 hours. Director wants resolution before dark. HRT green light is 18:32. She checked her watch. 18:05 hours, 27 minutes until breach authorization. Marsh came back on the phone at 18:15 hours. I am bringing out those who accept the sign. 23 souls, including myself. The 8 elders remain in the basement. They have chosen their path. Reverend, please convince them. No one needs to die today. Today has no end, Agent Reyes. You stop time. They will wait in the basement for the hour that no longer comes. It is a kind of mercy. The compound door opened at 18:28 hours. 23 adults walked out in single file, hands raised, no weapons visible. Marsh at the front. Burn scar on his right forearm from the propane accident in 2009 caught the late afternoon light. HRT moved in, secured them, zip-tied their wrists, loaded them into transport vans. Marsh looked directly at Claudia across the perimeter. His eyes held hers for 3 seconds. You gave us reprieve, Agent. I pray you understand what you have done. HRT breached at 18:32 hours. Protocol required it. Green light authorized. Commander led the team through the chapel entrance. 8 adults remained in the basement. Thermal imaging showed them crouched behind additional propane tanks they had hidden from Marsh's central stockpile, armed with rifles, barricaded. HRT commander called down the stairwell. Federal agents, disarm and exit now. Response came in gunfire. Rounds punched through the stairwell wall. 3 shots, 4, then sustained fire. HRT pulled back to cover. Commander deployed flashbang grenade at 1834 hours. Standard protocol for armed barricade. Canister tumbled down the basement stairs. Detonated. Magnesium flare at 3,000 lumens. Designed to disorient. But the basement air was saturated with propane vapor leaking from damaged tank seals where the holdouts had tried to rig their own deadman system after Marsh disarmed the primary switch. The magnesium ignited the vapor. Basement exploded. Fireball vented through floor joists and collapsed the chapel interior. Secondary explosion as the remaining tanks cooked off. HRT pulled back. Smoke column rose black and thick against the Montana sky. The smoke cleared by 1847 hours. Basement was a crater. Thermal imaging showed no movement. No heat signatures except residual fire in the rubble. Recovery teams went in at 1903 hours. 8 bodies, 4th-degree burns. Blunt trauma from structural collapse. Smoke inhalation. Medical examiner confirmed later, deaths occurred between 1834 and 1836 hours. 14 to 16 minutes after Marsh disarmed the main deadman switch. 26 minutes after Claudia negotiated the release of 23 survivors. Voss approached her at the perimeter at 1851 hours while recovery teams were still suiting up. 8 dead, agent. HRT followed protocol, but the narrative is going to be, why did you not extract everyone before breach? Claudia stared at the smoke rising from the compound. I negotiated 23 surrenders in 73 minutes from a man who believed the world ended at midnight. The 8 chose to stay armed in a basement. That is not negotiation failure. That is tactical reality. The media will not see it that way. She turned to face him. The media was not in that compound, sir. I was. At 1903 hours, she was ordered to surrender her sidearm and badge. Standard procedure for unauthorized discharge resulting in fatalities, even if the connection was indirect. She complied, handed both to Voss without comment. Write your report tonight. FBI will want preliminary findings by 0800 tomorrow. She sat in a bureau SUV parked at the staging area at 2017 hours. Wrote the incident timeline by hand on a legal pad. Black ink, measured handwriting. At the 1618 hours entry, she wrote, fired single shot through steeple clock to disrupt subject's temporal certainty. Subject responded by negotiating phase surrender over 73 minutes, releasing 12 women and children at 1714 hours, disarming deadman switch at 1808 hours, exiting with 23 adults at 1828 hours. 8 armed holdouts remained in basement. HRT breach resulted in propane explosion and 8 fatalities. 14 minutes after my negotiation concluded. She requested a copy of the negotiation audio transcript at 2109 hours. Voss was still on site coordinating with the medical examiner and the local FBI field office. She found him near the mobile command post reviewing preliminary forensic reports. Sir, I need the negotiation transcript from my report. He looked up, cleaned his glasses. Transcript is being classified under ongoing militia investigation. You will receive an edited summary for your statement. Sir, the full transcript proves Marsh negotiated because he believed I stopped time. It is exculpatory. It also proves you violated direct order and introduced mystical reasoning into federal negotiation. Leave it classified, agent. Trust me. She did not argue. She walked back to the SUV and finished her timeline, documented every timestamp, every action. Every word Marsh said that proved the shot worked exactly as she calculated it would. By 2300 hours, she was in a motel room in Kalispell, Montana, 60 miles south of the compound. Bureau had booked rooms for all personnel involved in the operation. Debrief scheduled for 0700 the next morning. She turned on the television. News coverage was already running. Chiron at the bottom of the screen. 8 dead in Montana militia standoff. FBI negotiators warning shot. Preceded. Explosion. The anchor described the siege. 41 adults. Apocalyptic leader. Propane bomb. The unauthorized shot. The explosion. 8 dead. The anchor did not mention the 12 women and children released. Did not mention the 23 adults who surrendered. Did not mention the 73 minutes between the shot and the deaths. She turned off the television, stared at her handwritten timeline on the legal pad. 12 pages. Every minute accounted for, every decision justified. Every life saved documented with timestamps and thermal imaging references and witness statements. She knew the truth was in the transcript. 87 minutes of negotiation. Marsh's exact words at 16:28 hours. If the hour is suspended, the father's wrath is suspended. His voice at 18:08 hours. You argue like a chaplain, Agent Reyes. Very well, I disarm the mechanism. The stopped hour is my shield. She knew she would never see that transcript again. At arrow 100 hours, she was still awake, staring at the motel ceiling. She thought about the 8 who died in the basement, thought about the 23 who walked out alive, thought about the 12 children who would see tomorrow because she fired one shot through a clock face at 347 meters, with 2.3 mph windage left to right. She thought about Jennifer Oakes saying, Reverend said the angel stopped the clock. He said we have tomorrow now. She thought about Voss cleaning his glasses and saying, Leave it classified, Agent. Trust me. She did not sleep. She wrote the timeline again on clean paper. Permanent ink this time, dated it, signed it, folded it and put it in her personal file. Not for the Bureau, for herself. Because some truths need witnesses even when no one asks questions. At 0557 hours, her phone rang. Voss. Debrief moved to 0600. Director wants preliminary findings before the morning news cycle. She dressed in the same clothes from the day before, drove back to the staging area. The compound was still smoking. Recovery teams had worked through the night. 8 bodies laid out under tarps near the perimeter. Voss met her at the mobile command post, handed her a folder, edited transcript summary, 4 pages. Her 87 minutes of negotiation reduced to procedural bullet points. No direct quotes from Marsh. No mention of the stopped clock theology. No mention of his belief that she had suspended time itself. The summary concluded. Agent Reyes employed unconventional tactics, including unauthorized warning shot. Subject partially complied. 8 fatalities resulted from armed resistance during HRT breach. Negotiation effectiveness, inconclusive. She read it twice, then looked at Voss. This is not what happened, sir. It is what the record will show. The record is a lie. He cleaned his glasses. The record is what survives institutional review. Your handwritten timeline is personal documentation. This summary is the official finding. You can argue it at the inquiry if you want your career to end today instead of next month. She did not argue. She signed the summary, submitted her sidearm and badge permanently at 0800 hours. The inquiry took 6 weeks. She was cleared of criminal wrongdoing but cited for protocol violations and tactical judgment errors. Early retirement offered. She accepted. The negotiation transcript remained classified. The stopped clock was held in evidence for 2 years, then released. Someone in the FBI evidence unit mailed it to her apartment in Washington, D.C. No note, no explanation. Just the clock in a cardboard box with her name on the shipping label. She hung it in her kitchen. Hands frozen at 16:19 hours, dust gathering in the mechanism. Some things are meant to stay broken until someone asks the right question. 8 years later, the declassification notice arrived. 4,000 pages released under FOIA request, but the transcript was still missing. Still classified under ongoing militia investigation exemption. Still buried. She sat at her kitchen table at 100 hours the night after the notice arrived, staring at the stopped clock, thinking about 73 minutes in November 2016. Thinking about 23 people who walked out alive because she fired one shot and convinced a man that, heaven's sake, clock had stopped. Thinking about 8 people who died 14 minutes after her negotiation ended because they refused to believe the sign. Thinking about Voss saying, "Leave it classified, Agent. Trust me." She did not trust him. She trusted the timeline. She trusted the transcript that would surface someday. She trusted the stopped clock on her wall that proved some truths outlast institutional revision. She fed her sourdough starter, measured rhythm. Same cadence she used to teach conflict resolution at the community college. The silver streak in her black hair caught the kitchen light. Her phone was on the counter. Mira's text from earlier is still on the screen. "I want to believe you." She picked up the phone, typed her reply. The transcript exists. It will surface. She hit send, put the phone down, stared at the clock. 73 minutes between the shot and Marsh disarming the switch. 73 minutes that saved 23 lives. 73 minutes that would stay buried until someone asked the right question and demanded the truth that Voss, classified to save his career and destroy hers. She did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table until dawn and watched the stopped clock hands that had not moved since 1619 hours on November 14, 2016. Some things are meant to stay broken until the record speaks. 3 weeks after she saved 23 lives by shooting a clock, Claudia Reyes sat in a windowless conference room at FBI headquarters and watched the Bureau bury her. December 2016. Washington, D.C. Fluorescent panels overhead cast morgue light across the long table. 3 senior agents she didn't know, FBI General Counsel with rimless glasses and a leather portfolio, Assistant Director Robert Voss at the far end, wireframes catching the glare when he looked down at his notes. Her written statement sat in front of the panel chair, 47 pages documenting every second from 1547 hours when the helicopter touched down in Flathead Valley to 1903, hours when she surrendered her sidearm badge. Beside it, a 4-page document marked Edited Summary, Negotiation Transcript, Operation Shepherd's Gate. 4 pages to replace 87 minutes. The panel chair was a man named Grayson, 28 years in the Bureau, 3 years from retirement. He read from a prepared statement without looking at her. Agent Reyes, you discharged your weapon at 1618 hours November 14, 2016, without authorization from command, striking a non-tactical target while the subject held a deadman switch connected to explosive materials. The discharge occurred during active negotiation. Explain your tactical reasoning. Claudia kept her hands flat on the table. She had not worn her wedding ring to the inquiry. Her husband had stopped speaking to her the day the media published the body count. Reverend Caleb Marsh's certainty was temporal, she said. His theology required time to move forward. He believed the apocalypse would trigger at midnight November 14, 2016. Every standard rapport tactic failed because his framework was cosmological, not tactical. Stopping the clock disrupted the temporal mechanism his certainty depended on. It created negotiation space that didn't exist before. General Counsel wrote something on a legal pad. The fluorescent hum filled the silence. Agent Reyes. The lawyer's voice was careful, the kind of careful that came before bad news. You're saying you introduced mystical reasoning into a federal law enforcement negotiation. I introduced a tactical intervention into a theological crisis. It worked. Caleb Marsh released 12 women and children at 1732 hours. He disarmed the dead man switch at 1808 hours. He surrendered with 22 other adults at 1828 hours. 23 people walked out alive because time stopped at 1619. Grayson glanced at Voss. Agent Reyes, 8 people died. 16 minutes after my negotiation succeeded. At 1832 hours, HRT breached the compound per authorized green light. 8 holdouts in the basement had stockpiled additional propane tanks and attempted to rig their own dead man switch. After Marsh disarmed the primary device, HRT deployed a flashbang at 1834 hours. The propane ignited. That's not negotiation failure, that's combat outcome. The third panel member, a woman whose nameplate read Assistant Director Chen, spoke for the first time. The after-action report indicates you predicted institutional resistance to your tactic before the breach occurred. You told Assistant Director Voss, and I quote, "If this goes right, you will bury it." Why would you say that? Claudia looked at Voss. He was cleaning his glasses with a microfiber cloth, methodical, not meeting her eyes. Because I knew firing without authorization would be classified as a protocol violation regardless of outcome. I knew the Bureau would prioritize procedural compliance over operational success. I made that calculation at 1617 hours, and I fired anyway because 23 lives were worth my career. Chen wrote something down. Grayson cleared his throat. Assistant Director Voss will now provide testimony regarding operational oversight. Voss stood. He put his glasses back on and approached the table with a folder. He didn't look at Claudia when he spoke. Agent Reyes has an exemplary record. 8 years with the Crisis Negotiation Unit, 43 prior operations with a 91% success rate. Her psychological evaluations consistently show tactical discipline and sound judgment under pressure. He opened the folder. However, her actions at Shepherd's Gate represent a significant departure from established protocol. At 1618 hours, Agent Reyes discharged her weapon without authorization during active negotiation while the subject held a dead man switch. The shot introduced combat imagery into what had been, until that moment, a peaceful dialogue. Psychological experts consulted after the incident believe Reverend Marsh was already wavering in his certainty before 1618 hours. The release of hostages would likely have occurred through continued rapport building. The clock shot was unnecessary and introduced unpredictable variables that may have destabilized the situation. Claudia's hands stayed flat on the table. She had known this was coming. She had predicted it at 1625 hours November 14th when Voss said, "If this goes sideways, you own it." She had replied, "If it goes right, you will bury it." Voss was reading from notes now. The edited transcript summary shows Agent Reyes employed standard de-escalation techniques throughout the negotiation. Marsh's decision to surrender appears to have resulted from these techniques rather than from any specific response to the unauthorized discharge. "I'd like the full audio transcript entered into the record," Claudia said. Grayson looked at Voss. Voss looked at General Counsel. The lawyer shook his head. "The full transcript has been classified under ongoing investigation into sovereign militia networks. The edited summary is sufficient for inquiry purposes. The full transcript proves Reverend Marsh explicitly stated he negotiated because I stopped time. At 1628 hours, he said, 'If the hour is suspended, the Father's wrath is suspended.' At 1641 hours, he said, 'If time has stopped, then midnight cannot arrive.' At 1717 hours, after releasing the 12 hostages, he told one of the women, 'The angel stopped the clock.' That's direct evidence my tactic worked. It's exculpatory." General Counsel's voice didn't change. "Classified materials cannot be entered into inquiry proceedings without director approval. Request denied." Claudia looked at the 4-page summary on the table. She had read it 3 times. It included timestamps, sanitized dialogue, procedural notations. It did not include a single reference to Marsh's theology, his temporal certainty, his statement that stopping the clock suspended divine judgment. 87 minutes reduced to bureaucratic bullets that made her unauthorized shot look like a panicked mistake that happened to coincide with Marsh's independent decision to negotiate. "The edited summary falsifies the record," she said. "The edited summary protects ongoing investigative equities," General Counsel replied. "It contains all information relevant to this inquiry." December turned to January while the inquiry dragged through witness testimony and procedural review. FBI psychologists testified that Marsh's profile suggested he was already experiencing doubt before 1618 hours. The release of hostages would have occurred regardless. Standard negotiation protocol would have achieved the same outcome with lower risk. Claudia sat through 6 weeks of testimony without the one piece of evidence that would prove she had saved 23 lives. The transcript stayed classified, the summary stayed sanitized. The inquiry concluded on January 19, 2017. Findings: Agent Claudia Reyes violated crisis negotiation protocol by discharging her weapon without authorization during an active hostage situation. While the subject ultimately surrendered, evidence suggests standard rapport-building techniques were the primary contributing factor. The unauthorized discharge introduced unnecessary risk and may have contributed to 8 fatalities by escalating tension among basement holdouts who perceived the shot as an assault initiation. Recommendation: reassignment to non-negotiation duties, pending retraining in tactical judgment and protocol compliance. The findings were released to media on January 23rd. The headline in the Washington Post read, "FBI negotiators stunt nearly triggered massacre, 8 dead after warning shot. Destabilized Montana militia standoff." The Wire photo showed Claudia entering FBI headquarters for the inquiry, face turned away from cameras, silver streaking, her black hair catching winter light. Her husband filed for divorce on February 3rd. They sat in the kitchen of the house they had shared for 9 years. He had made coffee. She hadn't touched hers. "I can't be married to someone who got 8 people killed and won't admit it," he said. "I didn't get them killed. I saved 23 people. The transcript proves it." "Then why won't the FBI release it?" "Because it's classified under ongoing investigation. Or because it proves you screwed up and you're lying to yourself about what happened." She looked at him. They had met in Quantico. He worked financial crimes, white-collar fraud, cases that closed with plea deals and cooperation agreements. He had never fired his weapon outside a range. He had never negotiated with someone who believed God's wrath was a temporal equation. "If you knew what actually happened in that compound, then tell me." "I can't, it's classified." He stood up. "Then maybe the FBI is right. The divorce was finalized in June. Claudia signed the papers in a lawyer's office in Arlington. No children, no contested assets, just the end of a marriage that couldn't survive institutional burial. Her daughter stopped speaking to her in March. Mira was 17, senior year of high school. She had Claudia's black hair and her father's certainty about right and wrong. She moved in with her father after the divorce papers were filed. Claudia tried calling, tried letters. Mira answered once, her voice flat and tired. Everyone at school knows you're the FBI agent who screwed up in Montana. They ask me about it. I don't know what to tell them because you won't talk about it. I can't talk about it, Mira. The negotiation transcript is classified. So you want me to just believe you? When the FBI says you violated protocol and 8 people died, I want you to trust that I wouldn't have fired that shot unless it was the only way to save everyone else. That's not good enough, Mom. That's you asking me to believe something you can't prove. Mira hung up. Claudia tried calling back twice. Mira blocked her number. The FBI reassigned her in March 2017, not to Quantico, not to a regional field office with negotiation duties, to Billings, Montana, 90 miles from Flathead Valley, desk job reviewing case files for procedural compliance. No field work, no negotiation, punishment dressed up as career development. She drove past the Shepherd's Gate compound twice a week. The road to her rented apartment went through the valley. The Bureau had dismantled the perimeter fence. The buildings were condemned, yellow tape fluttering in wind. But the chapel steeple still stood, white clapboard weathered gray, and at the top the analog clock face with its shattered glass and wrought iron hands frozen at 1619. She looked at it every time. A monument to 73 minutes no one believed had happened the way she remembered. 14 months in Billings, filing reports, reviewing transcripts from other negotiators' operations, watching the compound ruins through her windshield. In April 2018, the Bureau offered early retirement, mutual agreement to pursue other opportunities. She was 38 years old. She took the pension, signed the NDA covering classified materials, left the FBI after 8 years. June 2018, she moved to Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., one-bedroom apartment, rent-controlled, no family photos on the walls. She bought a sourdough starter and fed it every morning with the same measured rhythm she had used to calculate wind. Drift at 16-17 hours. She applied for teaching positions. Northern Virginia Community College hired her to teach crisis communication and conflict resolution. Academic theories about de-escalation for students who had never heard someone say God's wrath is a temporal equation. The depression came in waves, insomnia, hypervigilance around clocks. Every analog timepiece triggered flashback loops. The cold weight of the Remington, the crosshairs on wrought iron, the recoil at 1618, the long silence before Marsh's voice came back on the line. She removed all clocks from her apartment except one. She bought it at an estate sale in August 2018. Analog wall clock, plain white face, black hands, no second hand. She set it to 1619 hours, opened the back panel, stopped the mechanism, hung it above the kitchen counter where she could see it every morning while feeding the sourdough starter. Private memorial to 73 minutes. Evidence that outlasted institutional revision even when no one asked questions. 6 years teaching community college, 2018 to 2024. Professional competence without context. Students didn't know her history, colleagues didn't ask. She baked sourdough, graded papers, ran trauma loops every November 14th. She kept a personal case file in her apartment closet, everything unclassified. Ballistics report declassified in 2019 under separate FOIA request. It showed her shot trajectory, 347-meter range, 175 grain boat-tail hollow point. Windage calculated for 2.3 miles per hour left to right crosswind. Glass refraction compensated. 8-centimeter margin of error to avoid ricochet hitting 3 people standing behind the interior wall beneath the seats. Clock. Precision shooting under pressure, proof of tactical brilliance. But without the transcript to provide context, the ballistics just looked like lucky marksmanship during a reckless protocol violation. November 2023, 8th anniversary of the siege. An envelope arrived with no return address. Postmark, Kalispell, Montana. Inside, a newspaper clipping from the Flathead Valley Tribune. Obituary for one of the 8 basement holdouts. Handwritten note on lined paper, careful script. They made their choice. You gave the rest of us tomorrow. Thank you. No signature. Claudia kept the note in her case file between the ballistics report and her handwritten timeline. She didn't know which of the 12 released women had sent it. Probably Jennifer Oakes, who had told the paramedic at 17:14 hours, "Reverend said the angel stopped the clock." But she couldn't be certain. Evidence that someone remembered, that was enough. Spring 2024. A journalist filed a FOIA request that triggered the 8-year declassification review, standard procedure for closed investigations. The FBI released 4,000 pages of Operation Shepherd's Gate case files to public record in April. After-action reports, ballistics analysis, inquiry transcripts, psychological evaluations, media coverage, witness statements, still classified under ongoing militia investigation, the full audio recording and transcript of the 87-minute negotiation between Claudia Reyes and Caleb Marsh. The declassification notice arrived in Claudia's mailbox on a Tuesday morning. Yellow envelope, FBI seal, her name in bureaucratic sans serif. She opened it at her kitchen counter, read it twice, stared at the stopped clock on the wall. 4,000 pages released. The one document that would vindicate her still buried. The trap closed again. Maya Calhoun received the FOIA cache on the same day. Investigative journalist for The Intercept, 34 years old, forensic precision in her approach to institutional failures. She spent 2 weeks cross-referencing documents in the declassified files. The edited transcript summary described standard rapport-building techniques, Marsh gradually losing certainty. Hostages released as Reyes established trust. Protocol violation noted but characterized as unrelated to negotiation success. But the ballistics report showed Reyes had fired a shot requiring sniper-level calculation under active crisis pressure. And the psychological evaluation of Marsh emphasized his literalist temporal theology, apocalypse as mechanical trigger, at midnight time as divine countdown. The pieces didn't fit. Maya sent an email to Claudia on May 3, 2024. Ms. Reyes, I'm investigating Operation Shepherd's Gate for The Intercept. The declassified files raise questions the official narrative doesn't answer. I'd like to hear your account of what happened at the compound. Claudia stared at the email for 3 days. She had signed an NDA. She had been silent for 8 years. Speaking now could trigger legal consequences, and she had no proof that wouldn't remain classified until everyone involved was dead. She replied on May 6th, I signed an NDA. I can't discuss classified materials. Maya's response came 2 hours later. I'm not asking about classified materials. I'm asking why you shot a clock. Claudia sat at her kitchen table that night, laptop open, Maya's email on the screen. Her phone beside the laptop showing the last text from Mira, 6 years ago, the day Mira blocked her number. I don't know what to believe, but I know you won't talk about it. I can't trust someone who won't tell the truth. The stopped clock on the wall read 1619. It had read 1619 for 6 years. It would read 1619 until the mechanism rusted or the apartment burned down or someone finally asked the right question. Claudia opened her personal case file, pulled out the ballistics report, read her own handwritten timeline from November 14, 2016, written 3 days after the siege, rewritten in permanent ink at 0100 hours when she realized the edited summary would be the only official record. She stared at the timeline. 73 minutes from 1618 when she fired to 1808 when Marsh disarmed the switch. 87 minutes total from 1547 when she arrived to 1832 when HRT breached. 23 people alive because she had calculated wind drift and glass refraction and fired one shot at wrought iron. Hands. 8 people dead because holdouts stockpiled propane and HRT deployed flashbangs 16 minutes after her negotiation succeeded. The media had counted the deaths. No one had counted the survivors. Maya's question sat on the screen. I'm asking why you shot a clock. Claudia looked at the stopped clock on her wall. The hands hadn't moved in 6 years. Neither had the truth. She closed her laptop without replying. The evidence existed. The transcript existed. Somewhere in a classified server at FBI headquarters, 87 minutes of audio proving Caleb Marsh negotiated because she stopped time. She had told Mira the truth would surface. She had believed it when she said it. But 8 years had passed and the Bureau had buried the evidence deeper than any grave in Flathead Valley. Claudia fed her sourdough starter, measured the flour, watched the clock hands that would never move again. Some things stay broken until someone asks the right question. Maya Calhoun had asked. Claudia didn't know yet if that would be enough. June 2024. Maya Calhoun sat across from Claudia Reyes in a coffee shop on Capitol Hill at 0900 hours. The journalist was 34, wore a gray blazer, carried a notebook with color-coded tabs. She had 3 laptops open on the table and a stack of printouts 2 inches thick. Claudia brought nothing. No files, no records, no coffee. She sat with her hands flat on the table and waited. Calhoun slid a document across the table. Ballistics report, FBI seal in the corner, declassified April 2024. The official story says you destabilized the negotiation with a reckless shot. But this report says you threaded around through an 8-centimeter gap at 347 meters to hit a clock without injuring anyone inside the compound. Wind speed 2.3 miles per hour left to right. Glass refraction through the steeple window. Moving target. The firearms instructor who reviewed this file said it required sniper-level precision under extreme pressure. She looked up. That is not reckless, that is surgical. Claudia did not touch the report. She had not seen it in 8 years. The numbers were correct. The conclusion was correct. None of it had mattered in 2016. Calhoun flipped a page. Caleb Marsh's psychological evaluation from 2011 says he believed the apocalypse was tied to midnight November 14th, 2016. Temporal certainty. He removed all digital clocks from the compound 3 months before the siege. The steeple clock was the only working timepiece on the property. She leaned forward. Why would rapport building work on someone whose certainty is procedural? You cannot negotiate with a man who believes time itself is the enemy. Claudia kept her hands flat on the table. I cannot discuss classified materials. I am not asking you to discuss classified materials. I am asking you to confirm what is already public. Calhoun turned another page. Did Marsh negotiate because you stopped his clock? The coffee shop noise fell away. Someone laughed at the counter. A barista called out an order. Claudia watched the steam rise from Calhoun's untouched cup. The question was simple. The answer was 8 years overdue. Yes. Calhoun pulled a second document from the stack. Thicker, bound with a black clip. I filed a secondary FOIA request 6 months ago, specifically for the negotiation transcript. Public interest threshold, 8-year declassification rule. The FBI released it 2 weeks ago, buried in a supplemental document cache with 4,000 pages of logistics reports and personnel rosters. She slid it across the table. 87 pages, time-stamped audio log with verbatim dialogue. I need you to walk me through minute 41. What does Marsh mean when he says, "The hour is no longer upon us"? Claudia looked at the transcript, black text on white paper, her name in the margin at 16:25 hours November 14th, 2016. She had not seen these words since she spoke them into a phone while staring at a frozen clock through binoculars. She turned the page, found minute 41. Reyes. Reverend Marsh, time is stopped. The midnight you feared, it cannot arrive if the hour does not move. Marsh, 8-second pause. You stop time, Agent Reyes. Perhaps he grants reprieve. Perhaps I am to reconsider. The evidence she needed in 2016, the proof that tactical intervention disrupted theological certainty, the causation link the inquiry erased, public record now, 8 years late. This transcript proves you saved 23 lives by hacking his theology. Calhoun tapped the page. Why did the inquiry not see this? They classified it, gave the panel an edited 4-page summary that removed all references to his time-stopped reasoning, made it look like standard rapport building that coincidentally worked after I violated protocol. The summary said, negotiation effectiveness inconclusive. Calhoun pulled out a pen, clicked it twice. Walk me through the operational timeline, start at 15:47 hours. Claudia did, 3 hours in the coffee shop. No pauses. She walked Calhoun through Marsh's fixation on midnight, the failed standard tactics. Her tactical read that certainty was the enemy. The decision to stop the clock, the 73 minutes of negotiation where Marsh explicitly stated he was yielding because time had stopped. The phase surrenders, the 8 holdouts who refused to leave and died when HRT breached at 18:32 hours. Calhoun took notes in shorthand, filled 12 pages. At 1200 hours, she stopped and pulled out another file. I commissioned a ballistics deep dive from a former FBI firearms instructor. Retired 2022, no institutional conflict. He analyzed the steeple clock shot independent of the official report. She opened the file. Diagrams, wind tables, glass refraction calculations. His conclusion: this shot required compensating for 12-mile-per-hour crosswind, glass refraction through steeple, window and moving target sweep. Margin of error 8 centimeters to avoid ricochet hitting 3 people standing behind the interior wall. Whoever took this shot knew exactly what they were doing and executed under extreme operational pressure with zero room for error. Claudia read the analysis. The instructor had reconstructed her shot better than she remembered it. Wind data correct. Distance correct. Glass angle correct. The conclusion was not new information. She knew what the shot required when she pulled the trigger. The surprise was that someone had documented it. Why did you not fight the findings? Calhoun closed the file. I had no proof. The transcript was classified. My word against institutional narrative. FBI psychologists testified Marsh would have surrendered regardless. I could not prove causation without his explicit statements that time-stopping changed his calculus. I signed an NDA when I took early retirement in 2018. The NDA covers classified materials. The transcript is public now. You are free to speak. Claudia looked at the stack of documents on the table. Evidence she could not access in 2016. Available to anyone with a FOIA request in 2024. The system had not changed. The clock had. Yes, she said, I'm free to speak. July 2024. The Intercept published an 8,000-word investigation. The Woman Who Stopped Time. How the FBI Buried Its Most Brilliant Negotiation. Lead image was the steeple clock, hands frozen at 1619, photographed from the FBI evidence file in 2016. Subhead: Declassified transcript proves Agent Claudia Reyes saved 23 lives by weaponizing a doomsday prophet's theology, then took the fall for 8 deaths that occurred after her success. The article went viral. 2 million views in 48 hours. Social media platforms amplified it. Cable news picked it up by hour 72. Behavioral psychologists appeared on CNN and analyzed the transcript on air. This is textbook tactical empathy applied to an eschatological framework. Marsh negotiated explicitly because the clock stopped. The causation is undeniable. Former hostage negotiators called it heterodox but brilliant. One retired crisis negotiator from LAPD said on MSNBC, "Protocol teaches us to mirror and validate." Reyes did something protocol does not cover. She physically altered the subject's perception of reality. That is not reckless, that is operational genius. Mira Reyes read the article at 1400 hours on July 12, 2024. She was 23 years old, graduate student in clinical psychology at Georgetown. She had not spoken to her mother in 6 years. She read the article twice. Then she called. Claudia answered on the second ring. "Mira, Mom." Mira's voice was tight. "I just read the Intercept piece. Why did you not tell me?" "Would you have believed me without proof?" Silence on the line, traffic noise in the background. Mira was outside somewhere, walking while she talked. "I believe you now. I am sorry I did not before." They talked for 90 minutes. First real conversation since 2016. Mira cried twice, Claudia did not. They agreed to meet for dinner the following week. No promises beyond that, just one step. The media pressure mounted. CNN requested an interview. Claudia declined. NPR called, declined. PBS. Network morning shows, all declined. She issued a single statement through Calhoun. "I did my job. 23 people went home. I have nothing to add." Robert Voss appeared on Fox News on July 18, 2024. He was 61 years old, assistant director, wore his wireframe glasses and a navy suit. The host asked him about the transcript. Voss cleaned his glasses before answering. Agent Reyes is a capable officer who made a high-risk decision that happened to work out. But the transcript also shows she violated direct orders, introduced unauthorized gunfire into a volatile situation, and created unpredictable variables. If HRT had breached earlier per protocol, all 8 basement holdouts might have survived. We cannot second-guess tactical decisions 8 years later. Calhoun published a follow-up on July 20th. FBI's official story unravels under timeline scrutiny. She laid out the minute-by-minute breakdown with timestamps from the declassified logs. Marsh disarmed the dead man switch at 1808 hours. HRT breached at 1832 hours per pre-authorized timeline. The breach was not delayed by Reyes. The explosion occurred at 1834 hours when a flashbang ignited propane the holdouts had hidden from Marsh's inventory. Medical examiner confirmed 8 deaths resulted from fourth-degree burns, blunt trauma from structural collapse, and smoke inhalation between 1834 and 1836 hours. Conclusion: the 8 deaths were an HRT tactical outcome, not a negotiation failure. The FBI director ordered an internal review of Operation Shepherd's Gate on August 1, 2024. New panel. None of the members had been involved in the original 2016 inquiry. Voss was excluded from the process due to conflict of interest. September 2024. The review panel interviewed the released hostages. Jennifer Oakes testified on September 9th. She was 38 years old, lived in Kalispell, Montana, worked as a bookkeeper. She had been 30 years old during the siege. One of the 12 women and children Marsh released at 1732 hours. She sat in the FBI conference room in Washington, D.C. and gave her testimony in a rural Montana accent. Reverend Marsh gathered us after the shot. We heard it. We thought it was a warning shot. But he walked to the window and looked at the steeple and said, "The angels stopped the clock. We have tomorrow now." He would not have let us go without that sign. Agent Reyes saved our lives. The panel asked if Marsh had discussed releasing hostages before the clock shot. Oakes shook her head. He said we would all meet the father at midnight. He was certain. After the clock stopped, he said time was suspended and we had reprieve. He sent us out because he believed the apocalypse was postponed. 2 weeks later, Jennifer Oakes contacted Claudia Reyes directly. She had tracked down the apartment address through the article. She sent a package via FedEx. Inside was the steeple clock from the compound. Hands frozen at 1619, wrought iron frame. Glass cracked but intact. Oakes had salvaged it from the ruins in 2017, kept it in her garage for 7 years. She included a note written in blue pen on lined paper. "You gave us tomorrow. We never forgot." Claudia unpacked the clock at her kitchen table. The mechanism was dust-covered. The hands had not moved in 8 years. She hung it on the wall where the estate sale clock had been. The stopped hour visible from every corner of the kitchen. October 2024. The review panel completed its investigation. The findings were released on October 14th. Claudia read them at her apartment at 1700 hours. No one called to warn her. She found the document on the FBI public portal. Agent Reyes's actions at Operation Shepherd's Gate were unorthodox but arguably effective within the unique theological framework of subject Caleb Marsh. Evidence from declassified negotiation transcript indicates negotiated surrender of 23 adults was direct result of tactical intervention that disrupted subjects' temporal certainty. 8 fatalities resulted from HRT breach protocol encountering armed resistance in basement, not from negotiation, tactics employed by Agent Reyes. Original inquiry findings are revised to reflect Agent Reyes's negotiation as successful outcome under extreme operational constraints. The phone rang 2 hours later, FBI personnel. They offered Claudia reinstatement to the Crisis Negotiation Unit with restored rank and back pay. She declined. They offered a formal apology and a commendation medal. She declined both. She issued a statement through Calhoun. "I do not need the FBI to tell me I did my job. The 12 families who got their loved ones back already know." November 2024. Robert Voss announced his retirement on November 3rd, and he was 61 years old. Early retirement, effective immediately. No public statement about Shepherd's Gate, no press conference. FBI sources told Calhoun off the record he was given the option to retire quietly or face questions about why he classified exculpatory evidence and testified against his own agent in a 2016 review board. He retired. The wireframe glasses went into a desk drawer somewhere in Virginia. December 2024. Jennifer Oakes called Claudia on December 10th. "We are gathering on December 14th at 1619 hours. Private ceremony? Just the 12 of us and our families? We want you there." Claudia drove to Montana, 6 hours from the airport. The ceremony was held at a community center in Flathead Valley. The compound had been demolished in 2018, the property sold. The new owners built a youth center on the land. Basketball court, meeting rooms, kitchen, no steeple, no chapel. The 12 women and children from 2016 were now 8 years older. The children were teenagers. The women had gray in their hair. They stood in a line in front of the building at 16:19 hours and held hands. Jennifer Oakes gave Claudia a framed photograph. All 12 standing together in front of the community center at 16:19 hours. On December 14, 2024, inscription at the bottom in silver ink. You stopped time so we could have tomorrow. We mark the hour every year. Claudia accepted the frame. No speech, no press, no cameras. Just quiet acknowledgement from the people who lived because she fired one shot at a clock and proved that certainty, even apocalyptic certainty, is procedural. And procedures can be hacked if you understand the mechanism. She drove back to Washington, D.C. with the frame on the passenger seat. Hung it in the kitchen beside the stopped clock. Mira came for dinner 2 days later, first time in the apartment in 6 years. She looked at the clock, at the photograph, at her mother. You never told me, Mira said. You never asked. I am asking now. So Claudia told her. Not the tactical details, not the ballistics, just the part that mattered. I had 87 minutes to save 41 people. I saved 23. I lost 8. That is the job. Mira looked at the stopped clock. And you kept this all these years. Some things are meant to stay broken until someone asks the right question. Mira reached out and touched the frame. They mark the hour every year. Yes. Will you go back next December? Claudia nodded. Yes. The stopped clock hung on the wall, hands at 16:19, dust gathering in the mechanism. The silver streak in Claudia's black hair caught the kitchen light. The sourdough starter sat on the counter in its glass jar. Mira stayed for dinner. They did not talk about the 8 years between 2016 and 2024. They talked about tomorrow. Mira left at 2100 hours. Claudia washed the dishes by hand. No dishwasher in the apartment. She had never bought one. The ritual of cleaning by hand kept her grounded. Soap, water, methodical scrubbing. Her phone buzzed at 21:27. Text from Morgan. Coffee tomorrow 0700. Have something you need to see. Claudia replied, location. Same place, booth in the back. She dried the plates, stacked them in the cabinet. The stopped clock reflected in the kitchen window. 2 hours frozen in glass and metal. She thought about the 8 teenagers in Montana who carried December 14, 2016 in their bodies. The way trauma marks time differently than clocks. How some people age in minutes while others stay suspended in single moments for years. She met Morgan at 0700. The diner was half empty. Construction workers at the counter. Morgan sat in the back booth with a manila folder. No coffee yet. Claudia slid into the seat across from her. You look different, Morgan said. I had dinner with my daughter. First time? In 6 years. Morgan nodded, pushed the folder across the table. This came through channels yesterday. Classified briefing for active CTF personnel only. I pulled it because your name is in the after-action assessment. Claudia opened the folder. Bureau memo dated December 12, 2024. Subject line, post-incident analysis, Prophets Ridge compound, December 14, 2016, no. She scanned the first page. New information from a defector, former member of Silas Marsh's inner circle who left the compound in 2014, had been in witness protection for a decade. Recently agreed to full debrief in exchange for reduced charges on unrelated fraud. The defector's statement was on page 3. Claudia read it twice. Marsh intended the fire as theater. He had an escape tunnel under the chapel. Exit point 200 meters north in the tree line. Plan was to stage mass death, escape with core leadership, resurface in 6 months with new identity and claim divine resurrection. The prophecy was recruitment mythology. The clock was set to 16:19 deliberately. He wanted federal response. Wanted siege footage for martyr narrative. Claudia closed the folder, looked at Morgan. He was never going to kill them, Morgan said. The fire was cover. He planned to vanish. And the 8 who died? Collateral to the narrative, they believed. He didn't. Claudia felt something cold settle in her chest. The shot through the clock, the evacuation, the bodies in the chapel. She had thought she was stopping apocalypse. Turns out she was disrupting theater. Does this change anything? Morgan asked. Claudia thought about the 23 who walked out, the 12 who marked 1619 every December, the teenagers who grew up free of Silas Marsh, the photograph in her kitchen. No, she said. I saved 23 people, that is the job. Even if the threat was performance, the threat was real to them. Their belief made it real. I disrupted the mechanism. That is all tactics can do. Morgan leaned back. You sound like you made peace with it. I made peace with what I control. I fired one shot. Everything after that is consequence, not intent. They drank coffee. Morgan asked about Mira. Claudia told her about the sourdough, the dinner, the conversation about tomorrow. Morgan smiled. You never stop moving forward, Morgan said. Neither did you. I just file paperwork now. You saved lives. Claudia shook her head. You gave me 87 minutes. That is saving lives. They finished their coffee. Claudia walked out into December cold. The sky was clear, no snow. She thought about theater and prophecy and the difference between stopping apocalypse and stopping belief in apocalypse. Decided it didn't matter. The work was the work. You assess, you adapt, you fire. The rest is noise. She drove home. Hung the manila folder in the drawer beside the old case files. The stopped clock still hung in the kitchen, the photograph beside it. The sourdough starter bubbled on the counter. She fed it, measured flour and water with precision, stirred until the consistency was right. At 16:19 hours, she stood in her kitchen and looked at the clock, thought about Montana, about 8 teenagers marking time, about Mira asking questions after 6 years. Some things stay broken until someone asks the right question. Some hours get frozen so tomorrow can exist. The work continues. 6 months later, June 2025. Claudia Reyes stood in her Capitol Hill apartment kitchen at 0557 hours and fed the sourdough starter with the same measured rhythm she had used for 8 years. Sunrise light through the window caught the silver streak in her black hair. The counter held something new now. A framed photograph of Mira taken at their first dinner together after the reconciliation. Her daughter smiling, silver bracelet visible on her wrist. The one Claudia had given her at age 12, worn again after 6 years in a drawer. The stopped clock hung on the kitchen wall. Steeple clock from the compound, hands frozen at 16:19, Jennifer Oakes's inscription on the frame. Claudia glanced at it while kneading the dough. She didn't flinch anymore. It was memorial now, not wound. She still taught at the community college, still declined interviews, still baked bread for neighbors who didn't ask questions. But now when students Googled her name, they found the Intercept article, not the buried scandal. Some recognized her. Most didn't. She preferred it that way. One change, she had added a new lecture to her syllabus. When protocol fails, negotiating with certainty. She used Shepherd's Gate as the case study, names redacted, details sanitized for classroom discussion. She taught her students that sometimes the rulebook had no answer for the shape of the crisis in front of them. That certainty, theological, ideological, existential, required different tools than fear or desire. That the best negotiators read the opponent's framework and found the one variable that could shift it. Mira visited twice a month now. They talked about the 6 years they had lost, the transcript Mira had finally read, the therapy they were both doing to rebuild trust. Claudia told her, I couldn't give you proof I didn't have. I'm sorry that silence felt like guilt. Mira had answered, I'm sorry I didn't wait for the truth to surface. They were learning to be mother and daughter again, slowly. With the care you use handling something broken that you're trying to repair without making the cracks worse. November 14th, 2025, 9th anniversary. Claudia received an envelope, postmarked Kalispell, Montana. Inside, a photograph from the private ceremony she had attended in December. All 12 released hostages standing together, holding hands at 16:19 hours. Handwritten note from Jennifer Oakes. We gather every year. You're always welcome. The hour stays stopped for us. Claudia taped the photograph to the refrigerator next to Mira's picture. She thought about the question she had carried for 9 years. Did she save 23 lives, or did 23 people happen to survive her recklessness? The transcript had answered it. The ballistics had proved it. The families had confirmed it. But the 8 who died, she still carried them. She knew HRT's breach had caused the explosion. She knew her negotiation had already succeeded. She knew the blame had been misplaced. She still felt the weight. Some nights she woke at 16:18 hours and stared at the ceiling until morning. Some nights the stopped clock ticked in her dreams, even though the mechanism had been broken for 9 years. Some nights she heard Marsh's voice on the open line. If the hour is suspended, the Father's wrath is suspended. And she wondered if he had understood in those 73 minutes between clockshot and disarmed switch that she had weaponized his certainty against him, or if he had simply believed what he needed to believe. She would never know. Marsh was serving life without parole in a federal supermax. He refused all interview requests. He had not spoken publicly since the day of his sentencing in 2017. Voss had retired to Florida. No public statements, no memoir. He had taken the quiet exit the Bureau had offered him, and in exchange, the internal review had not recommended criminal charges. Claudia did not follow his life. She did not need to. The transcript had done what she could not do for 8 years. It had spoken for her. Maya Calhoun had moved on to other investigations. Corporate fraud now, financial crimes. She had texted Claudia once in March, "Still the best story I ever broke. Thank you for trusting me with it." Claudia had not replied. She didn't know what to say. The story wasn't hers to give. It had belonged to the 12 hostages and the 23 who surrendered and the 8 who died. Calhoun had simply found it and brought it into the light. The framed photograph on the counter, Mira at dinner, laughing, caught the morning glow. Claudia looked at it while shaping the dough. Her daughter's face, open and unguarded, the way it had been before the siege, before the estrangement, before 6 years of silence. They were rebuilding, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Some things could not be rushed. Claudia turned back to the counter. The dough was ready. She shaped it with practiced hands, folded it, set it in the proving basket. The clock on the wall read 16:19, same as it had yesterday, same as it would tomorrow. Frozen hands catching morning light. Outside her window, the city woke. Time moved forward for everyone except the 73 minutes preserved in wrought iron and shattered glass. She had not worn the uniform again, had not testified at the inquiry that reversed the findings, had not accepted the medal or the reinstatement or the formal apology. But every year on November 14th, 12 families marked the hour their children came home, and the clock stayed stopped. She thought about that sometimes, how time was not a constant, how 73 minutes could stretch across 9 years and still feel immediate, how one shot, one frozen hour, one woman refusing to accept that certainty could not be negotiated, how all of it had become a single moment that would never finish passing. The steeple clock had been a working timepiece once. Analog face, wrought iron hands, mounted 15 meters above the ground on the Shepherd's Gate Chapel. Marsh had removed all digital clocks from the compound 3 months before the siege, believing electronic signals were government surveillance. The steeple clock had been the only timepiece on the property. Now it hung in her kitchen, hands frozen, mechanism broken, dust gathered in the gears. She left it there because some things were meant to stay broken, because the stopped hour was the only proof that could outlast institutional revision, because the 12 families who gathered every November 14th at 16:19 hours needed a physical place to anchor their memory, and so did she. Claudia wiped her hands on a towel. She poured coffee. She stood at the counter and looked at the photograph of her daughter and the stopped clock on the wall in the morning, light coming through the window. This was the new normal, quiet, domestic, unremarkable. She had saved 23 lives in 87 minutes. She had carried the blame for 8 deaths for 8 years. She had been vindicated by a transcript she could not access and a journalist she had never asked for help. She had rebuilt a relationship with her daughter, one careful conversation at a time. She had declined every gesture of institutional recognition because she did not need the FBI to validate what the families already knew. And every morning at 0557 hours, she fed the sourdough starter and glanced at the stopped clock and thought about the question she would carry for the rest of her life. How many people have to survive before you stop counting the ones who didn't? She didn't have an answer. She suspected she never would. Chen nodded. She stepped onto the porch, then turned back. "The clock," she said. "Is it from—" "Yes." Claudia closed the door. She walked back to the kitchen. She looked at the stopped clock and the photograph of her daughter and the morning light coming through the window. Some things stay broken until someone asks the right question. Some costs outlast institutional memory. And some moments, one shot, one frozen hour, one woman who refused to accept that certainty could not be negotiated, never, finish passing. She poured another cup of coffee and fed the sourdough starter. This was Tuesday. This was enough. The morning light climbed the wall. Claudia measured flour. weighed salt, folded the dough with methodical precision. Her hands moved through the familiar sequence. The ritual was the same. The context had changed. 3 months after the Cascade leak, the FBI had issued a formal apology, not to her, to the families. The statement acknowledged procedural deficiencies and premature operational termination. It mentioned her by rank and last name. It did not use the word exoneration. It did not mention the 8-year smear campaign. It did not acknowledge that the institutional doubt had been engineered by the same people who had ordered the tactical withdrawal. She had read the statement once. She had filed it in a box with the other useless paperwork. She had fed her sourdough and continued living. The knock came at 06:23 hours. Claudia wiped her hands. She checked the window. A man stood on the porch, mid-50s, navy blazer, government posture. He held a folder against his chest like a shield. She opened the door halfway. "Special Agent Weir." The man showed credentials. "I need 5 minutes." "No. It's about the Bridgeport program." Claudia studied his face. Weir had been one of Kincaid's team leads. He had been in the talk during the siege. He had not testified at the inquiry. He had not leaked anything to Cascade. He had survived the institutional purge by staying silent. 4 minutes, Claudia said. Weir stepped inside. He did not sit. He opened the folder and pulled out a single photograph. Grainy, overhead angle. Timestamp in the corner, 15:47 hours, November 14th. The image showed the chapel courtyard. Marsh stood in the center, one hand on the boy's shoulder, the other holding a radio. 17 adults formed a semicircle behind him. The angle suggested the photograph had been taken from the ridge, the same position Kincaid had occupied. "This was taken 43 minutes before you made the shot," Weir said. The original classification level was top secret. It was declassified 6 weeks ago as part of the post-Cascade review. Claudia looked at the photograph. Marsh's body language was relaxed. The boy was smiling. The adults behind him showed no signs of distress or coercion. The image contradicted every element of the imminent threat briefing she had received. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because the institutional narrative is that you saved 23 lives. The families believe you saved 23 lives. The media believes you saved 23 lives." Weir closed the folder. "And all of those things are true. But this photograph proves that at 15:47 hours, 43 minutes before the shot, there was no imminent execution. Marsh was not holding the boy hostage. The threat window had not closed." Claudia set the photograph on the counter. "You're saying I had more time." "I'm saying the intelligence was manipulated to compress the timeline. Kincaid wanted the siege resolved before it became a media spectacle. He fed you a threat assessment that eliminated negotiation as an option. You made the only decision the briefing allowed. And the recording I heard? Marsh saying he would execute the boy. Taken from an earlier call, spliced into the final transmission. The forensic analysis is in the full report." Weir tapped the folder. "It's all here. Every manipulated comm. Every suppressed photograph. Every instance of institutional pressure to force tactical action instead of sustained negotiation." Claudia looked at the stopped clock. The hand still read 16:19, the moment the bullet entered Marsh's skull, the moment the boy was saved, the moment 8 people burned. "You're telling me I didn't need to take the shot." "I'm telling you that you took the shot based on intelligence, designed to eliminate every option except the one Kincaid wanted. You saved lives. You also ended lives based on a manufactured timeline. Both of those things are true." Claudia poured coffee. She did not offer Weir a cup. "Why now?" she asked. "Why bring this to me after 8 years?" "Because the FBI is trying to rebuild credibility. The Cascade leak exposed institutional rot. The director wants a clean slate. Part of that process is ensuring that operators who carried the institutional blame understand the full context." Weir paused. "You were used. The inquiry blamed you to protect the command structure. The families forgave you because they believed you had no choice. But the photograph proves you had more time, and that changes the moral calculus." Claudia set the coffee cup on the counter. "Get out." Weir did not move. "You have a right to know." "I have a right to decide which truths I carry. You want institutional absolution. You want to say the system failed and the operator was just following orders, but I pulled the trigger. I made the call. I live with the aftermath. Not you, not Kincaid, not the families. Me. She opened the door. I don't need your context. I need my morning. We're picked up. If this story moved you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Tell us in the comments which moment stayed with you. Thanks for staying to the end. We'll see you in the next story.